listening to Carpool Theology. Join Alex, Shanah, and Grace, that's me, as we hit the road to discover who we are in light of who God is. Along the way, we'll be joined by friends, authors, and community leaders to discuss the intersection of faith and action and have a ton of fun while doing it. So grab a coffee, jump in the car with us, and let's roll.
All right. What's up? What's up? What's up?
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Still morning, 10:45.
It's a beautiful day here in old Fresno.
Mm-hmm. Sean calls these, my husband calls them Chamber of Commerce days. It's
Why?
like, this is the day you need to do a photo shoot to bring people to your city when it's like the weather is beautiful and sunny. And
I actually love that.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to
Carpool Theology.
I'm Grace.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Shanah.
We have a fun episode today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do.
A super fun one with our.
I mean, they're all fun,
That's true.
right?
I agree.
But this is special.
It is special.
Mm-hmm.
You're special, Jordan.
Yeah, we're excited to have Jordan in the car with us today.
Allowed to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you intimidated? How do you feel right now?
I didn't know when I'd be released.
Oh.
Release
the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
The Kraken.
I meant to say Kraken. I meant to say Kraken, but Kraken came out.
She's had a little Kraken
I
this
was
morning.
really hoping that you thought it was actually called a Kraken.
Oh no.
That was my hope.
Dude, what if?
What if?
What if?
And this whole time you're like, yeah, when Parts of the Caribbean came out, I thought it was a Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
I loved those movies so much, you guys. That was
It's because you had a thing for Johnny Depp.
obviously.
Wow.
Obviously.
It's a little too grunge for me.
Well, he's only gotten worse as time has gone on. He has not aged like a fine wine.
But that under eye mascara though.
He's really stuck to that weird beard though.
He
is.
really
Weird
has.
beard.
Yeah.
The character, he has not gotten out of character for a long time.
He
True.
drank too much
True.
rum
Weird
and
beard.
I would like to just like take his jewelry and just weigh it on a scale and his boots and then weigh him on a scale and see which one comes out more.
I feel like Edward Scissorhands just really marked him.
Yeah.
Like it just made him a metal person. And he just can't get it off of it. you
Yeah.
know? He has to have his medals with
Perhaps.
him all the time.
His heavy
Yeah.
metals.
Perhaps.
Him and Tim Burton's relationship, I just feel like he never just stopped being a character. Like now Johnny Depp is just a character of himself.
Yeah.
You guys want to know a fun fact is that I used to, when I lived close to LA, we'd go like on celebrity house tours because I'm a freak. Okay?
Oh my gosh, my mother-in-law loves
Like
Absolutely.
you go look inside their houses?
No, but we go
We go
drive
to
by
buses
them.
and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, like the Star Tours and stuff?
Yes.
100%.
My
Did you ever
mother-in-law,
see any?
my mother-in-law
Yeah.
just went on one
Yes.
like a month ago.
Oh,
Shout out to Cheryl.
They're so much fun. They're
I've
so much
never
fun.
done that.
I also did one on my bachelorette party because I just love them. Anyways,
Wow. Different people.
different people, different time, different place.
I would be so mad at myself if I did that.
Same.
Why?
I'm just saying.
I'm with you,
Why?
Jordan.
So
I'm on Jordan.
dirty.
I'm on Jordan's boat right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I do
Like,
it.
look
I
at
do
these
it.
zoo people.
I know.
Wow, a real one.
I
In real life.
Yeah. I literally could not.
He's just watering. He's like, get away from me.
Literally,
Water
I
their
just
own
can't.
lawns.
It's so
The
weird.
camera captured me.
Now that I've gotten roasted 2 episodes in a row,
I'm sorry. Just live your life. You are so uniquely
Okay, so
you.
you were on a. Were you telling us a story
guys
about
taking me
that,
to
or
D&D?
that's the end of the story?
my story
Carpool,
was...
carpool karaoke's not registered, huh?
no, we're going to the DMV. We're passing the DMV. Listen, I was telling the story because I did see Johnny Depp's house. And does it look like a pirate's lair, like with a little own like lagoon? It does.
No.
Yes, he is Jack Sparrow. He hasn't. The character has not left him.
gosh.
I love
Yeah.
that.
It's
I have
it.
less respect.
That's fine. He can live.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Thank you, Jordan.
I
The
kinda
authority
wish-
in the car.
I appreciate that you've given him the right to just live his life.
Yeah, he could do that.
I
if he
like it.
wants.
Yeah. Now that we've had a pretty in-depth conversation about Johnny
Yeah.
Depp,
Yeah.
we're going to take a sharp left turn here.
Mm.
And
gradual.
I'm going to intro our guest who's already made himself quite comfy in the car. Today in the car, we have our good friend Jordan. His wife is one of our really good friends. Us three, we
She's our actual
shout
friend.
out to Jamie.
It's
We
a
love
true
Jordan,
better
too.
half situation.
True better half situation.
said
But
What do the pastors always say? Like, I'm smoking hot wife.
Oh yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. Yeah. Woo.
yeah.
Delete.
Yeah.
But Jordan, Anyways, she's beautiful.
She is.
All that to say,
Inside and out.
yes, absolutely amazing. Jordan is husband, father, friend to us, and also a pastor. And so, and Jordan was on the trip that Shanah and I went on to Mississippi. So yeah, welcome
to the
Welcome to the
car.
pod.
Thank you guys. Thank you. When do I sing? When do we sing?
So Jordan, tell us how long you've been married. Tell you about your kiddos.
Tell us about where you're
Give us
at in
a little
life right now. Yeah.
Man, I've been married for 11 years, and we're in our 12th year. I just figured out recently that you can say that when you're in the year before you have the anniversary, so that's cool.
Okay.
I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old boy who is just all boy, all energy, very intense, and the best in every hard and good way. And then we have a little 14-month-old girl named Jubilee. Oh, and the boy's name is Rowan, which is great. So, and then Jubilee, and she's just pure joy. So
she really is.
She is a bundle and chunk, and she doesn't want to walk yet. So that's fine with us. And yeah, we're having a lot of fun. I'd say this has been a really sweet season for us in that we love where we live. And our neighborhood's like little Mayberry, and all the kids get sick together and play together and have fun. And Jubilee got like a stomach sickness, and then everyone in the neighborhood did. But the price of community. So,
Yeah.
Sharing is caring.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what Sunny got. Sunny also wasn't feeling well.
Really?
Yeah. From
Jubilee.
Jubilee.
Well, babies barfing is so weird.
Yeah, you
They'll
never
just
know.
like look at you and just be like, and then just like you're like, are you dying?
Yeah. Or did you just
And then
like,
right after they're like,
not
what
like it?
happened?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
You never know what's going on.
Like they're almost mad at you. Like, why'd you do that to me?
Poor baby.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Jordan, we are in our Peacemaking series. Shanah and I got to share a little bit in our episode about our trip and tried to give a 1,000-foot view as best as we could. But yeah, tell us a little bit about like your experience on that trip and maybe your biggest takeaway.
Yeah, maybe start with like why you wanted to go and what your biggest takeaway was. I like that.
So I had some friends who had gone the previous time we went. Have you guys talked about the trip before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
People know.
avid listeners of Carpool here would know that this is it was a pilgrimage, if you'd say, to understand sort of the church's involvement in the civil rights movement. And for me, I had a lot of experience with the racial reconciliation conversation in my early 20s. And I just circumstantially have gone away from a lot of those conversations. I think the passion still is inside, but it hadn't really been stoked as far as a flame. And I saw it as an opportunity to re-engage some of those things for me that felt like they hadn't been fed in a while. So yeah, I as a pastor, it was free, which is nice, and it's a good incentive, but I also just knew that we didn't have much more time with John Perkins on this side of heaven, so I wanted to take the opportunity to spend some time with him, whatever that looked like when we got there. So yeah.
That's cool.
And then, what you said, big takeaways or what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. I think biggest thing for me was I think the surprise that I had sort of forgotten about a lot of the like nonviolent resistance.
Yeah.
And the price that those people paid for their freedom, and the methodology being so unique, but coming straight from the teachings of Jesus, and what that cost them continually, and what they're willing to do with their lives in order for the people around them to gain rights and freedom. I think the centrality of the church in that effort, being a a communal presence, but then using their influence for the greater good of the people around them, and that being like a common understanding. You know, I'm am used to the church being a very apolitical thing, and in this environment, it just was like impossible for that to happen, because then like, yeah, they felt like they weren't being true to their desire to make peace in that environment. So, yeah, and then I think honestly, it's changed a lot of my views of how I read and interpret scripture. I saw a group of people who read it collectively and said, you know, from my tradition, a lot of times we read scripture and we say, what does this mean for me? And then what do I do with that? And the answer to what I do with that will then dictate what my role is in the world. These traditions, primarily in the Black church, or I don't know if it's like ubiquitous with a lot of the people of color or oppressed communities, but they started with, what does this mean for us as a community and as a people? And then what is my role in that meaning?
Right.
And so it seems subtle, but it really changes your responsibility to the world around you and your belief that we're all interconnected in the ways that we seek the kingdom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are probably big three for me.
That really stuck out to me too. And yeah, I just want to touch on it. Like like how we read the Bible is different. And that communal aspect, that lens that we look at things through. And how often, especially in the Old Testament, I can read it and think that like I try to pick out like what's for me. Like if I think of like Isaiah or Jeremiah or like the prophets, and like find like, oh, what's the message for just like the individual in this, when he's talking to a collective group of people. Often those prophets are not talking to individuals most of the time. They're talking to people groups, typically the Israelites. And we don't think that way, and yet we've been told in the New Testament in Romans that we have been grafted into a people group. Now we're all part of a big people group. And even Paul in the New Testament, he's not talking typically to individuals. He's talking to churches, a group of people. And yet the way in which I frame it in my mind is, well, I can just pick things out that are just for me. When in reality, he's calling us all, Paul or whoever the writer is calling us all into a collective transformation.
Yeah, I think we bring whatever we have to the Bible. So it's difficult not to read it that way, coming from an individualistic worldview. But yeah, it was great. I mean, I think we all agreed too, where it just, I think, you know, being native Californians, were like, this is 1,000,000 years ago. And then I think everyone on the trip was like, this is not that long ago.
Right.
And like, people were killing other people for the color of their skin in broad daylight and celebrating it like not that long ago. And then, you know, the other sort of systemic racially motivated laws and things that were mapped out for us that have like you know, just different states and their like marriage rights of interracial couples and things not dissolving until like even the 2000s.
So I think it was Alabama that was like 2011 or something.
It's
like that.
insane.
Yeah.
Everybody these days has a podcast, even your girls. Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is like, even if you're driving around in a car, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best to get them talking. We have one right now. You can go fill out a poll when you go on Spotify for Carpool Theology. With Spotify for podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify podcasters from the beginning over here at Carpool Theology, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Yeah.
So Jordan, you talk about how like it helps you like with how you read and interpret scripture, and how you like you talked about your neighborhood a lot, and we know you to be like a peacekeeper. Like that's kind of like the theme of the pod, right? Like of this series. So talk a little bit about like peacemaking, peace faking, peace breaking, kind of break that down.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in the spirit of humility, if you want to like maybe give some examples on how you've been, because I know I have and am continue to be all three of those things, whether conscious or unconscious. Can you like just talk a little bit about that and how you have seen or experienced that as a pastor, as a community member?
Yeah, so I am very naturally conflict avoidant. I think, I get that feeling of like, fight or flight. I'm like, fight. Wait, no,
Yes.
flight. Like I kind of
Yes.
get a sense of adrenaline where I'm like, this is it, and then I want to like run away. And so I think I think that's just kind of how I'm wired. I don't know if I can point to like environment or anything that has helped shape me that way, but I spent a lot of my life sort of trying to be the chameleon that pleased everyone. And I would say even my ministry life, I was trying to do often like what I would call utilitarian ministry, where I'm like, how do I do the most good and rub the least amount of people the wrong way? And like I would preach even from the standpoint of being like, my first question isn't like, and this is humbling for me to admit, but like my first question wasn't always, do you clearly understand what God's purpose is in writing this message? And it was, do you like me? And are you going to listen to me because you like me? And I would say on a good day, it was like, try and win them so that they'll listen to the message. But on a bad day, it was like, I'm just like afraid of people
Yeah.
and what they think about me. And conflict had a lot to do with that too, It's a scary thing. And so like, I went through like a recovery process at my church, and for just many different reasons. And one of them was fear of man. And I like, we went through the amends thing, and I was like, I actually have surprisingly few amends, because I've always desperately wanted, like I've almost been good at peacemaking because I'm so afraid of people being like mad at me. And but I didn't do the peacemaking in a way that was like very healthy. And so I would say often it was peace faking. I don't like argue with people. I don't get in fights. I get, I'm married, so I have arguments. But it's basically her and my 4-year-old. But like, I would say it's been since probably the pandemic that this has changed for me, because I was, without my own control, forced into a leadership position in my community where every single decision I made somebody really pissed at me. Like, because I mean, if you had your ears or eyes at least a little bit open, you knew that like everyone and their mom had a different opinion on everything.
Right.
And so,
Especially the moms.
yeah. Even my mom,
Yes, all the
and
moms.
so like, it's okay. I make a decision and I get 15 praises and 15 slaps, you know?
Yeah.
And I simply had to wrestle with the idea that, like, look,
Oh,
I'm gonna.
sorry.
Shoot.
I,
Coming in hot.
Sorry.
it's just the price we pay for the carpool.
Yes.
you
Which
know?
is
The disco balls are rocking.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'll take it, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And so with the pandemic, I just had to say, look, for the first time, God, I am going to own the fact that you have made me a leader. You have put me in the place I'm in for a reason. And yes, there could be a million other people who do my job, but you've put me here. And you've given me convictions, desires, and vision. And I'm going to use the things that you've given me to make those decisions, no matter the cost. And I'm going to do my best to do that. So naturally, every decision I made, I had to have all these conversations from a really hard standpoint, right? And people whose motivations were either political or I didn't even know where they're coming from, you know? Like, you guys remember, it was so messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I felt like it was a literal, like, forge, or like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I stepped into this fire and I came out the other side somebody who was like deeply committed to no longer peace faking
Yeah.
and to like actually owning my views of things. And you know, I don't know if that answers your question.
It
But, like-
does, and
No, I
even
love
like
that.
it brings to light another question, is like the aftermath, because I work in recovery, and like oftentimes, I'm not saying that this is yours, but I'd love to know if it resonates with you. Many times, peace fakers, or those like peacekeepers, just to keep everybody happy, everybody's my friend, everybody's fine, we're all fine, it's fine. Oftentimes results in a lot of resentments. Which is like envy, right? Because they're like, oh, everybody else's voice gets heard, but mine doesn't, or whatever that is. That's kind of what it was for me. But so there's this aftermath where like everything looks great on the surface, and then one day you have a giant sinkhole where there should be like a beautiful like grassy lawn, you know, and like health, but instead, because there's been this sort of erosion underneath the surface, yeah, so I think especially in like a church context, it can kind of go in like a few different ways of like, you're either a peace breaker and there's like dissension and you're blowing stuff up, or the extreme of peace faker and there's just distance. So did you see that? Do you see that currently?
Yeah. I think it's hard to tell. I mean, I struggled deeply with like unsurfaced bitterness, and I think a lot of that was my own peace faking. So you know, like, the weird thing about bitterness is it is like a sense of power.
Yeah.
You feel like you hold the reins of justice in that you've been wronged, and these people like deserve your sort of bitterness, right? And I think in wrestling with like that, I had to figure out how what actually the cross means for my own peacemaking, right? And I think this is probably going to be a theme. I don't know if I'm going to properly answer your question, but I'm just going to go where it's going to take me. So,
Yeah.
Beautiful.
but
Love it.
That's what we like.
I think so you have like, I've been studying Ephesians a lot, and you have Paul, who his whole thing is like, in Christ you are a new people, right? Christ, the elect people in him, Israel, the Gentiles, everyone's under his banner. And but what were you before? You were a slave to the powers and principalities. And but you've been bought with a price. So, but what was the means of war through which we were bought? How did Christ, how did the most powerful being in existence buy us back? Self-sacrifice. And like the most counterintuitive human thing we can think of, which is the cross. And like God did that for us. And so how does my own sense of justice match up with his self-sacrifice on the
Yeah.
cross?
Mm-hmm. Good.
It's incompatible.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good.
And-
Wow.
Yes.
And so I had to start to view my relationships as not, now this is a fine line and I'm still trying to figure this out, but
That's good.
how do you maintain self-worth and dignity while letting the cross and self-sacrifice and the forgetfulness of yourself be the main driving factor for which you approach everyone?
Yeah.
Your enemies, your loved ones, and everybody in between.
Yeah.
And that feels like the biggest journey I'm on now,
Mhm.
which says like, and I haven't done it super well recently. I think like there's been actually, like I said, I don't fight with anybody. That's probably wrong. Because I had an argument recently with one of my best friends, and I was so embarrassed about why that happened. And I think when I pulled it apart, it was because I wasn't willing to give him the same grace that I expected him to give me. And my standard was for him to approach me with the cross, and I wasn't willing to do it to him. And so, like, even when things break down, I feel like that desire is still there and should be there. So yeah, I think that's the like wrestle for me with peacemaking, is like, how do I let I mean, a lot of people talk about like truth and grace, you know, or like
Yeah.
or like when do you approach with the hammer, or like when do you give the roses and
Yeah.
the
When
back
you start
massage?
flipping tables.
Yeah.
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 But I don't know. You know, I think if you start with the cross, I think everything that like proceeds from that will help give a healthy framework for how you do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we were talking about, as we were prepping for this episode, we were talking about just how beautifully you handle a lot of like conversation that could, you know, distract from that peacemaking goal. And with believers, and you hold like other believers accountable to things in the name of peacemaking or whatnot. But how I've recently studied this term peacemaking was bringing God's kingdom, the gospel, to people, and bringing them peace. And so this is how really I feel like it was someone who just taught on it that I really like grabbed onto it. But and they were, I think it was through Sermon on the Mount, referencing like that was how Jesus was talking of it, was to non-believers of like, and believers. Well, I think they were both in the crowd, right? But just this concept of that actual peacemaking is bringing the gospel, bringing the truth of who Jesus is to situations and to people. And so I love that you really are saying that. Like, how are we approaching the cross, or applying the cross to these situations? And I think at the core, that's what peacemaking, that's what I think Jesus was communicating peacemaking is in his time. And so that's really, that's, you know, that's,
Well, even the thing that got Jesus killed is self-preservation. Like, I think like these, you know, religious leaders or Roman rulers or whoever, like he's overturning the tables, right? He's changing
Flipping the narrative.
you know, their way of engaging with their traditions and cultures. And, you know, being a very Jewish Messiah, he was like, you heard it said this, now I say this.
right.
And that really made people mad.
Yeah.
And I think power structures, but then financial and economic structures, like he was like really giving them the business.
Mhm.
And
But at the same time, the underlying tension is there were already two sides already at war.
Yeah.
Like the Roman Empire is on Holy Land. You have
Mhm.
Jewish and religious leaders that are already
Mhm.
trying to fight up against that.
yeah.
And then it's not like Jesus offered a second way. He offered a third.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like he came in the middle of that. So sorry, just wanted to add
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think most conflict comes about, and I appreciate you guys saying you think I do it well. I think it's very it feels like it impossible sometimes.
Yes.
But
Yeah. You're not alone in that.
most conflict comes out of self-preservation.
Yeah.
A feeling of are you challenging my way of life, my
Yes.
worldview, my desire for obtaining this thing? And I think the third way of Jesus, like you said, would be to meet that person where they're at. And I think that's the thing that probably has helped me the most in, because being a pastor, most of my conflict comes with Christians.
Yes.
Because they don't like a decision I made, or they don't like something I said, or fill in the gap. But I have to first tell myself they are me, and we're in the same boat here.
Yeah.
And we're seeing things differently, but this is my brother and my sister.
Right.
And that changes the conversation. And I have to ask myself, what is the value that is being challenged that they're upset about? What is the thing they're trying to preserve, or to keep or hold on to, or
That's a good question.
And because if we can talk about the value, if we can get side by side towards this thing, then it doesn't become about you.
Yeah.
The guns aren't pointed at me and them. It's been okay, what are we actually talking about here, right? And I think a lot of things cloud that, emotion.
Yeah.
Clouds that big time.
Yeah.
Well,
I was just gonna ask, what is that? What is that about us? And how is it? And I think you've touched on it a little bit, but just to beg the question, how is it that we can all hear the same gospel, hopefully, or a variation of Jesus died on the cross, he rose again 3 days later. We hear the simple gospel, and yet the way in which that part of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, we all do that so differently, and sometimes in harmful ways, in ways that don't benefit our neighbor. How does that happen?
Yeah, I think we've used I don't know if we've used it on the podcast or not, but the term holy disruptor. And as you're talking, Jordan, I love that term, because I feel like it's such a sacred thing to disrupt a system that is oppressive or that is incomplete, or those things are really they're good and bad. They've been done well, they've been done terribly. But I think the key word there is holy disruption. So how do we disrupt things that need disrupting, that we're called to disrupt, in a way that is still cross-bearing?
Well, first of all, that's where I get all my wood for my wood shop.
Oh, nice. Hello, lumberyard.
Vital.
Yeah, I like that term. I think being a disruptor makes me really nervous.
Oh, 100%.
I'm we came back from Mississippi, and I was oh, what am I gonna do with this from the pulpit? People are gonna get mad at me.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know if it's right, but I think most of the time we get so sideways when we become what I guess I would call an adjective Christian, where you're I'm a this type of Christian.
Yeah.
And fill in the gap, right? I'm conservative, liberal, I'm even black, white, I'm whatever it is, right? When you let your disposition inform like your identity as an adopted son or daughter, or your environment inform your identity more than it already would. But when you start leaning into that as a sort of add-on, rather than saying I am a Christian, who is?
Yeah.
I think that ends up creating, I think, dynamics in your own worldview that will cause you to have whatever that adjective is supersede kingdom values.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I think that ends up being very very close to the reason why we have much of the conflict we have inside of Christian circles.
So is that an identity piece? Is that a belonging piece?
I think I get like hesitant to say that because none of us can like really fully remove our environment
Right.
or our dispositions.
Right.
Yeah. Our worldview lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to do everything you can to get outside of it, and you have to distrust what Paul calls the powers and principalities of this world, which will are delighted to have you believe that your system will benefit from slapping your Christian identity on it.
Yeah.
And so I would say like it's an issue of allegiance, and that like if you are not constantly fighting for your allegiance to Christ and his kingdom, it will like complacently just slip into the hands of whoever else is going to take it.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's it for
And
sure.
that causes, I mean, everything on Twitter is mostly done by that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the big thing I took away from our Mississippi trip was that idea of the powers and principalities at work, and you know, under the guise of ethnicity and the color of our skin, but really about like power and oppression. And that's what I took away of like, okay, how do I stay cognizant of the powers that are at work in this world on this side of heaven, and cognizant that the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives in me? How do I match those two things up?
Yeah. I think what struck me about that trip and that thread of powers and principalities was that and especially in that time period, so much of the racism and hate was coming out of the church and places of worship were like a machine kind of generating people of hate. And what do we do with that? Like, what do we do with powers and principalities that are happy and comfortable to dwell within the walls of our own churches and our discipleship models? And how do I stay like cognizant of those things too, and become a peacemaker who's aware that some of the gnarliest battles I may fight on the side of heaven are with people who also claim Jesus. Yeah, like how do we step into healthy conflict with people who also love Jesus, and the end goal would be that would be reconciliation and restoration. How do we do that?
Teach us, Jordan. 3 easy steps.
Yeah.
Please.
Hey, y'all, this conversation is getting so good, and we hope you're loving it. When you engage with what we do, it helps us bring even more amazing guests and topics into the car. So get involved. Your support means everything to us. Continued prayer, leaving us a review, answering our poll questions, or subscribing to the pod all add up in a huge way. We are so grateful to get to this. Consider supporting us in a financial way through a monthly donation. Stick with us and find out more at the end of this episode about how you can get involved. Let's keep it rolling.
I think I learned a lot from doing that side-by-side conference and book about this, like this topic, and really this is so layered, right? I mean, there's not like I don't know if there's necessarily like a blanket answer to this, but I really loved like what I took away from that. Really, there was so much about this there, and it's about what you said, Jordan, like meeting people where they're at, and humility, and yeah, like that submission to the cross of how can I view this with like a gospel lens of what the Lord has done for me, and I think that was like the whole thread of that book that I really loved, that helped me like approach those, because yeah, that's such a reality in all of our lives, right?
Yeah.
Even like reflecting on conversation I just had yesterday where with like one of my family members, and I'm just like, oh gosh, like how do I like you know, your flesh instantly is like ugh.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think like it can get muddy, right? Like for me, I know I personally struggle with that concept, meet them where they're at, to me can sometimes really support my peace faking. I don't know if that makes sense, but I almost use it as a crutch. But I also know that I'm called to love others as myself. And so it's hard. Like, it's just hard. Like, I mean, it's messy. We know this, but if I'm honest, I can really, really, under the name of like, just wanting to balance not being too judgmental or condemning, or again, meeting people exactly where they're at, not, and using that as a again, a crutch to not be what I think is defined as a true peacemaker, which is bringing truth with the love and grace, and pointing people to Jesus. And so I'm with you, Jordan. I'm like still very much so like, and I think like if most Christians are honest, I hope that most will say they're still working this out. Like, this is like an ongoing forever process as we like die to ourselves every single day. Like, we're never going to get this, I don't think, right perfectly. But man, like, it's hard.
Well, I think like every healthy conflict for me starts with my enemy is not flesh and blood. So this person
that's good.
is not my enemy. And I have to believe that truth of scripture.
Can you just say that again? I feel like that's worth saying twice.
My enemy is not of flesh and blood. That is a promise that's given to us that's like in scripture. And we have to believe that when we approach any conflict. And that Satan is pleased when we are disunified. And so
because he wins.
Yeah.
If you're mad at Stevie because of what Stevie said, and draw a line there and be like, he's a shallow thinker, dum-dum. Satan wins.
When we're focused on each other, we're ineffective in mission, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I have to approach it with that. And if that's sort of like, even if they don't think of it that way, I found that, like, honestly, 99% of the time, if you come in with an understanding that, like, they're not my enemy, there is something standing between us that we can solve, and we can get to some sort of answer together, and like we're together in this, and that helps me to deprogram some of the initial adrenaline of emotion that would go into the like, okay, do I need to run away or fight, or and from that, I think Shanah would know this term, but like, you have to own what you need to own, right? Like, own your percentage of what's going on in that moment. And I think if there's nothing, I think having this idea of just staying confused, and most of us in conflict, we have this ability to magically fill in every gap. So somebody says something, and then you're automatically assuming intention, desire, value, and then what they meant. by the thing they didn't say, and then you're all the way down the rabbit hole of assuming that they hate you and they've probably talked to other people about you and all these things.
Yeah.
But what would be better is to say, okay, here's what happened. Can you help me understand why you said that? Or explain to me where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's a one-sided thing where they're frustrated with you, like, I think you can hear them out. Most of the time. I've been in situations where I'm like, you probably need to cool off
Yeah.
before we talk. But I
Sure.
think that's good.
Yeah.
And the commitment is to talk. But I think if you stay confused, if you try and understand, even if they're misguided, where they're coming from, then you actually have some sort of reciprocity that creates the fertile ground for actual peace.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's good.
and it's also dignifying, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
good.
For both people.
So the thing that the Lord's been working on with me in like the peacemaking you're about to have, like we were talking about like the conversation when it gets to that point when you're like trying to stay curious, you're staying confused, you're not writing the end of the story, you're not filling in false conversations and all of that. The thing the Lord's been working on me, which is really still tender, is like the deeper level of that where I may have hurt someone or I may be coming into this conflict or standing up for what I believe in. My motives might be pure as the driven snow. And still, if I'm misunderstood
Yeah.
or in any way, I could hurt
Yeah.
someone.
That happened to me yesterday.
So I'm not alone.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like, because I can get really justified, like, well, I meant the best and I was doing what
Mm.
Scripture calls me to do. And
Yeah.
but were you slow? 10 out of 10, no. I was not slow.
Yeah.
I was not looking for my cross
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
to bear in that.
Yeah.
I was right.
Bro.
And my motives were to like do the right thing, to do the God honoring thing, and still there's
You guys
effort.
know I'm right like 99.9% of the time, right?
Obviously, it goes without saying.
I think people are like, and this is self-preservation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is I am not going to apologize for what I do not understand. Because that feels like an injustice.
Yeah.
But when you have a person standing in front of you saying, no, regardless of motive or regardless of, miswording or whatever, even if it's their interpretation of your words, it still hurt their feelings or it did something to them that at least was not intended for you.
Mm.
And I think it's okay to apologize for that and say, I'm so sorry that my words hurt you.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to hurt them,
Yeah.
if that's the truth, right? And those are the things that are disarming but really difficult to do.
Yeah.
And a key part of that, I mean, if we're on the road of like how to do, like we're on a how to thread right now. Key to that is like I hear you saying like taking ownership. I'm so sorry, even though you don't understand how it did that or why it did that. You're saying I'm so sorry, my words did that. Not I'm so sorry you feel X, right? And so that is such a key piece of it that most people also lack understanding in why that's so crucial in actual like.
Isn't that the most parent apology of all time?
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Or
sorry you feel that
spouse
way.
apology and like
Athlete apology. I'm
Me
sorry
and my
that all my
husband-
25 affairs hurt you.
My mom.
Or,
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
you
too,
feel
or
like-
I'm sorry for my tone, but I meant every word I said.
Well,
right.
here's the thing, because what you're not doing is saying like, I'm sorry I confronted you on that. Because they might have needed to be confronted. Say, I'm sorry I didn't slow down to be sensitive to you in that moment. Can you forgive me?
Yeah.
Because guess what? Anytime you come in and be like, you know what? I'm not sorry for what I said, but I'm sorry for how I said it. Nobody says, now that you say that, I probably misinterpreted. I was feeling really sensitive and I probably misinterpreted. No. But when you say, I did not slow down.
Yeah.
I did not take into account what you were going through when I approached that conversation.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, well, I may have I may have misinterpreted what you said. Let's untangle this together.
Mhm.
Like, that's a peacemaker
Mm.
that owns 100% of their 2%
Mhm.
fully
Yeah.
without softening the message that needs to be conveyed. That's the holy
Yeah.
disruptor.
Yeah.
Well, and our command, right, is in as much as it depends on you, make peace with everyone.
Yeah.
And whether or not you had control over it, you did not do as much as you could do
Mm-hmm.
in that moment if you don't try and understand them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
And yeah. No, I don't think
And that doesn't always come right away. Like, it might come a couple of months later.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I really could have done that better.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Most of the time I get myself in trouble because I am a very like I make fun of the people I love usually. And
Me.
as you guys found out on the Mississippi trip, but like I just like I don't I also love like the safe environment of that and like pushing people and
Right.
then sometimes I just misinterpret it and I say the wrong thing and then like hurt somebody's feelings. And I had a situation recently where I did that and which I thought was a safe friendship, and I said something really dumb to a person who I love, and they didn't talk to me for a year.
Wow.
And I, every once in a while would reach out like, hey, I'd love to get together and just say sorry to your face and hear you out, and they were just like, no. And then one day they were like, I want you to know that I've forgiven you and I don't want to talk about it. I just want us to be friends.
Yikes.
And I was like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like actual peace. But I've literally done everything I can.
Yeah.
And I can't force this person.
Yeah.
And so I just said, thank you. I appreciate your forgiveness. I'm thankful for it. And,
Yeah.
and so like you literally sometimes just don't even have control.
Yeah.
And you have to do everything in your power
Yeah.
to make peace and to do so. But you just sometimes like there's two parties or multiple parties in every one of these things. And it's messy.
Mm-hmm.
Because forgiveness and even, like, to use recovery language, like making amends, and that's not necessarily reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, you can have full access to my life again,
Mm-hmm.
or that this is a safe friendship relationship for me to be in. Sometimes it just means that you're each individually reconciled to the Lord because you've offered forgiveness, so it's not always like a reconciliation of the relationship, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, like in the South, it's, and even in our own city, like, the church is still very segregated in ways, right? And there's been a lot of forgiveness, I would say. But I don't know that, like, there's a mutual sort of reaching across to create something new.
Yeah.
Like, we're all still very much so living in a lot of these same
Segments.
lanes and categories,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's good. That begs my question to land our plane here is, what does the church and the body look like at peace? Like when we've made peace. What do you think that looks like?
Jesus is back.
I almost feel like peace is it's a the church would be much more, it's more of a disposition than it's a reality. So we need to promote peacemaking and reconciliation and healthy relationships and proper allegiances that lead to healthy relationships. But I truly believe that, like, for as long as sin exists, we will just keep fighting.
Right.
But it
Yeah.
is the disposition of our hearts that will commit us to reconciliation and peacemaking continually until Jesus returns.
That's good.
Yeah, I like that. It's more of a disposition,
Right.
than anything, because I think that gives such permission to be following the Spirit in all things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, humility, and I think you cannot have peace without that humility and a humble disposition of just all of God's people in
Yeah.
His church, being willing to just humbly surrender to each other, to Christ.
Yeah. Well, Jordan,
Good talk.
good talk.
Good talk.
Before
Jordan.
we end, we have 2 last
Gifts?
surprise questions.
Oh, dang it.
If to go along with our car theme, as we have been driving all
As
over
you
town.
will.
we love a good
And
pun.
I had no idea where I was going because I'm not from here. But what is fueling your tank right now? Could be something really serious, could be something really funny, could be something complete, whatever is just giving you life, fueling your tank.
One is I'm in book 3 of this fantasy series
Wow.
Yes.
love it.
called the Mistborn series, and it's amazing. And also, I feel like this sounds lame, but Jamie and I go to the same gym, and it's like our first hobby together, and it's so fun.
I love it.
Like, we work out together, or if we don't work out at the same time, we'll do the same workout. It's the way the gym works, and we'll like talk about it.
Jamie is
Yeah.
so cute too. She'll be like, "Yeah, baby," like yelling
Yeah.
across the gym, and then she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, you're so strong! Yeah, baby."
Very supportive.
She's
yeah.
so supportive.
Very supportive.
She's so cute, dude.
Stop.
Like, so
You're for my friends?
You're embarrassing me.
And you're all like hopped up and like trying to get
You're
juice.
just like throws it to the ground. She's like, "Yeah." It's so cute.
I think obviously it's very healthy, but then it's also just a really fun rhythm for our family, and it's like a unique
Sweet.
little pocket and community that we've entered into. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So good.
Okay, next question. What can you not leave the house without?
Pants.
Freaking
Have you
crap,
tried?
dude.
Have you tried to leave
Come
it?
Come on. Come on. We reject that answer, actually.
And don't say my Bible.
Uh,
Come on.
the sword of the spirit must be upon my hilt.
My hilt. There's your fantasy guy.
I was going to say,
coming
how's
out.
your fantasy book, guys?
What can I not leave the house without?
Yeah.
What's in your pockets right now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, probably my Bose headphones
Mm.
that are noise canceling. They're
Overhead?
they're little like ones. I am
what a
obsessed with
bougie
these
boy.
things. I've been doing like walking lunch sometimes, and like I'll listen to podcasts or music, and it's just I love these things. And or if I go shopping, I love listening to like books on tape while I'm shopping. Costco and stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us at the car
Oh,
today.
yes.
We're so
Yes.
grateful.
Yes.
Thanks for walking us.
Combo, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for walking us through peacemaking. So, all right.
Till the next time.
Till we meet again with our sword and our hilts.
What
Farewell.
if it is a hilt?
You tell me,
I
fantasy
know.
boy.
What if it's dirty?
Oh, yeah.
Farewell, carpool.
Fare thee well.
Fare thee well.
Carpool again.
You've been listening to Carpool Theology. We hope this episode was encouraging, fun, and challenging for you as you walk with Jesus and your community. If you loved what you heard today, we invite you to join our amazing team of monthly supporters. For as little as $3 to $5 a month, you can support Carpool Theology. We're committed to bringing authentic and honest side-by-side conversations about faith in a fun setting like a drive around town. Click the link in our show notes or on our Instagram page at carpool-theology to start supporting us today.